Slides that I'm going to be showing, you can download them as a PDF from my website at this link, downloads.freshandalive.com. And people usually don't write that down at the beginning of my presentation, so I've got it at the end of the presentation too, because usually some of the stuff people aren't used to hearing. But one of the things I like to do is I go look at all this pie in the sky stuff, and then I like to bring it down to, okay, great, you know, it's wonderful that the universe is made of matter and energy and blah, 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 but what can I do with it in my kitchen? You know, it's like if galaxies are spitting out all this superluminal light, what can I do with that in my garden? You know, what can I actually do with this knowledge? So that's one of the things I'm going to impart a little bit on you today. I'm basically going to be covering a lot of concepts and things that are being discovered in science, and then give you some conceptual ideas of what can be done with it. I have a lot of talks online on YouTube, on my blog, where you can see a lot more details, because I really like being able to actually have useful information that people can use. I went to school for electrical engineering, so I've been programmed heavily to have practical applications for science. So I like you know, using this stuff to actually do things with. So we'll get into some of that here toward the end. And as far as who I am, and it's like Don said, you know, just go to my website, read my bio. If you find this interesting, just read my bio on my website, because I want to spend as much time as I can on this presentation. I don't know if we'll have time for questions at the end, so we'll see. So anyway, the physics of how consciousness creates reality, that's pretty presumptuous, you know, as if I know, like, who am I to know that, right? Well, it's really just a matter of, because of the realms I work in, I've been teaching natural healing for about 25 years, but I also have a background in electrical engineering. I've worked in the medical system, and I've worked with free energy technologies. I've worked with a lot of advanced technologies that most people wouldn't believe. They would think it's just science fiction. So I've seen a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't believe, and I've worked with a lot of things that are very advanced. And so it gives me a different perspective when I'm looking at anything, whether I'm looking at healing work or whatever. And so it's not so much that I've figured out how things work as just that I've been exposed to a lot of the discoveries that are being made in science and in other areas in healing that are not, you know, getting out into the mainstream. And some of it's really mind-blowing stuff. And so I just kind of like to every now and then take that and kind of throw it out to people and say, hey, check this stuff out. So I'm not saying that this is the way things are. I'm just saying this is kind of what we're discovering right now. Really, I think that the universe, the multiverse, and everything in it is so grand and so complex and so much bigger than us. I think for us to really understand it and comprehend it is kind of like an amoeba understanding a 57 Chevy. You know, and I may be presumptuous. Maybe amoebas are smarter than I'm thinking they are. But I'm guessing that an amoeba probably doesn't understand the bigger picture of the 57 Chevy and making out in the back seat and, you know, going to the drive-in and that kind of stuff. So I think the universe is kind of like that for us. You know, we're at one scale of this multiverse that extends infinitely in the galactic scale and in the subatomic scale. And so, you know, we basically create these metaphors, these working metaphors of how things are so that we can navigate through it. And so that's kind of how I'm looking at all of this. Is it like, this isn't necessarily the way it is. This is just a little metaphor that we're all kind of creating amongst ourselves to, you know, kind of like a working model so we can figure things out and be happy and hopefully be happy and have some fun. So, I need to first introduce you to some fundamental concepts before we get into more details, because without these it would all sound like a bunch of crazy gobbledygook. And one of the things I wanted to introduce you to, if you haven't heard of it already, any of you guys that have heard me speak have probably heard me talk about this over and over and over again, because it is such a fundamental, it has such a fundamental impact on our lives, and yet nobody much knows about it. And that are simply some minerals, some very special minerals that occur on the periodic chart in the platinum group, for those of you chemistry geeks. Platinum group metals like rhodium, iridium, palladium, osmium, platinum. Copper, mercury, gold, and silver also, which are not platinum group metals. These metals can exist in a very unusual form. Normally, all of these metals are crystalline. All metals are crystals, basically. And what makes them a crystal is that their atoms are bound together in some kind of three-dimensional grid pattern, and that gives them their appearance of being shiny and metallic and hard and all those kinds of things. But it turns out that these metals, these select group of metals, can exist as individual atoms of the metals that are not connected to each other. And when they exist in that form, they have really, really weird properties, and rather than being metallic looking, they all look like white ceramic powders. So there's a man named David Hudson in the United States who rediscovered these. The ancient people have talked about this stuff for thousands of years, and cultures around the world have discovered this stuff and kept it amongst the elite in general, knowledge of this stuff, because with this knowledge comes a lot of power. So David Hudson, who was a wealthy farmer in Arizona, rediscovered these and labeled these minerals Ormus, or Ormes minerals, which is an acronym, O-R-M-E-S, which has been bastardized a little bit, I guess, for copyright reasons, to O-R-M-U-S. So you might see either one, Ormes or Ormus, but they're both an acronym for orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, which is just a fancy name that David Hudson came up with to name these really special superconducting minerals. And these minerals have really weird properties. As you can see here, this little picture, they look, like I said, they look like white ceramic powders, but they have a lot of really weird physics. Number one, they're not regular matter. They're actually multidimensional matter. So this little pile of powder that you see here, 2/3 of it is actually existing in other dimensions of time and space. And so it actually connects multiple dimensions or frequencies of time and space to our three-dimensional reality, or our physical reality. And it acts as an interface between them. And so that's one of the very interesting properties about this stuff. It's actually multidimensional matter. It's not conventional matter. And it's been talked about in the past, over thousands of years. Some people may have heard of white powder of gold, manna from the Bible, shewbread from the Bible, the philosopher's stone, M-state minerals is sometimes what scientists will call these. But they're just, like I say, they're just minerals. People, when they start looking at what these things can do and some of the applications for them, they get confused. But they're just minerals that happen to be able to exist in multiple dimensions of time and space. Whoop-de-doo, right? So the interesting thing about these is when you ingest them, it turns out they're in food and they're in water. And when we ingest them, they're extremely healing and regenerative to cells in the body at a very, very fundamental level. They're also anti-gravitational, so they want to levitate, especially if you heat them. They will actually levitate. And when David Hudson was trying to figure out what this stuff was, he was actually trying to get gold out of gold mine tailings. Gold mine tailings are the ore that's left over after you've extracted all the gold out of gold ore that you can get. And he knew that there was still a little bit left in there, and he wanted to squeeze it out. And he wound up discovering this in the process. And so in the course of testing it with the finest and most expensive labs in the world, he discovered that when you heat this stuff, it will actually just disappear. It'll start going anti-gravitational, so if you have it sitting on a scale, it'll actually start, not only the weight of it will go to zero, but it'll actually go negative and start pulling on the scale and bringing a negative weight onto the scale as it phases out of 3D reality and disappears. And then when you remove the heat from it, it will reappear and bring back its normal weight. But it always only has a weight of about, I think, 2/5 of what it actually is for the mass. So it's this really weird stuff. It's in food, it's in water, it's in our bodies, it's in animals, it's in all kinds of stuff. It's very healing, regenerative. And it was also mentioned in the Bible. In Exodus 16:14, I found this very interesting because we know now from making this stuff alchemically and making it in laboratories what it looks like and how it operates. But whenever the Bible was written in Exodus, it said, when the layer of dew evaporated. Now this is talking about Moses and the Israelites when they left to go out into the desert for 40 years. They reportedly, according to the Bible, ate shewbread or manna, which is this ormus. And that's all they had to eat out in the desert for 40 years. So for 40 years, supposedly, the Israelites ate manna. And Exodus describes what the manna looked like. It says, when there was a layer of a dew that evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness there was a fine flake-like thing, fine as the frost on the ground. Well, as it turns out, evaporation is one of the ways that you can make these monoatomic elements. So it kind of jives with what we know scientifically about this stuff. Now, as I mentioned, these minerals are superconductors, and superconductors have a lot of weird properties, one of them being that they can conduct electricity with zero resistance. So you can do a lot of weird things with them. They also create superconducting fields known as Meissner fields, and these Meissner fields can put out huge amounts of energy. They also are extremely sensitive to fields. Extremely sensitive, to the point where these minerals can actually pick up the gravitational fields and scalar fields and other energies coming off of planets and suns from many, many light years away from Earth. So they actually act like antennas for energies throughout the cosmos, what conventional scientists would call cosmic radiation. These things can pick it up like an antenna and bring it into the local area where it's at and create a localized field that's actually very harmonious to living organisms and very healing to organisms and very supportive of their life systems. So where do these things come from? Where, it's like these aren't just made in laboratories. They're made in nature all the time. They're in our bodies, they're in plants, they're in animals, they're in all living organisms. And they come from soil, they come from rock. Volcanoes produce large quantities of these things. When a volcano erupts, it's remineralizing the earth. And you guys might remember that pesky Iceland volcano that erupted a few years ago, and it was blowing ash all over Europe, and everybody was upset because it was interfering with air traffic and stuff like that. Well, that's actually a fantastic event for the earth because it spews huge amounts of extremely rejuvenative and regenerative minerals, including these monoatomic minerals. And if you go onto YouTube, you can actually look and see a video. If you go on YouTube and search on Iceland or just volcano lightning, you will see lightning shooting up out of that Iceland volcano as it's erupting. And of course, scientists are baffled because they don't understand anything about monoatomics, but it's because all of that ash has so much of these monoatomic superconducting minerals in them that it creates a superconducting Meissner field, which creates huge, huge amounts of electricity, and it wants to ground out, so it shoots lightning all over the place. So volcanoes are a big part of it, but also microbe action in soil. Microbial action in soil actually will break down minerals into particles that plants can uptake. Plants can't suck boulders up through their roots, so they have to uptake tiny particles of just a few atoms bundled together. Those are known as angstrom particles. But also, there are monoatomic particles in soil created by these microbes eating these rocks. They eat rocks, they break them down into angstrom and monoatomic particles that the plants can uptake, and then the plants get them in them. And so if you know this, if you understand this, you can take volcanic rock powders that are high in these monoatomics and feed them to your plants and also feed microbes to it, and the microbes will eat the rocks, break them down, and deliver it to the plants, they'll uptake it, and then you get insane growth, insane growth. I use ormus all the time in growing food at my house, and when people come to my house, they're blown away. For example, I had 3 little basil plants I got from Publix, the local grocery store. They were a little wilted, they hadn't been watered enough, and they were kind of wilted, and I thought, well, there wasn't a lot of basil around at that time in the store, so I took them home, and I started feeding them ormus and everything. And now, well, probably after about 6 weeks, they went from being, maybe 12 inches high to about 3 feet high. And within 2 months, they were about 4 feet high, and eventually they got up to 6 feet high. And my wife, when they got to be 6 feet high, and they were the size of a bush. I mean, they were gigantic. And my wife finally harvested and made pesto with it. She just cut them in half and made a gallon of pesto with this stuff and left the other half sitting there growing still. And now they're back up to 4 feet again, and they're growing all over the place. And we just feed them ormus about once every 6 months, and they just grow up. And here's the cool thing. You're not, with this stuff, you're not creating some kind of chemical abomination like with chemical fertilizers. This is what plants are designed to uptake and get into their bodies. And same thing with us. We're designed to get this into our bodies. So what you wind up with is massively nutrient-dense food that's extremely healing and regenerative. And the plants themselves are extremely robust to heat and cold and disease and insects. It's like, I don't have to worry about bugs on my property because the bugs try to eat, you know, plants will produce phytochemicals that act as natural insecticides to keep bugs from eating them. Let me tell you, man, we don't have bug problems at our house. It's just like when you feed these plants this stuff, they go berserk and you get incredible growth. And also incredible fruiting. You know, it's not unusual. Like we have a couple of, what are they, little, not kumquats. No, kumquats. Yeah, they are kumquats. And they made it through the hurricane. We had a hurricane blow through, you know, and ripping everything to pieces. We literally had a 250-foot long pile of debris out in our street that we dragged out from our property when we were all said and done cleaning it up. But those 2 kumquat plants made it through the hurricane. All the leaves are about blown off of it, but the fruit was still hanging, just loaded up, because we feed them ormus. And so it's just really, really interesting the levels of nutrients that you can get in these foods. I turned Dr. Joseph Mercola onto this stuff, and he was sprouting. I was having problems sprouting, and so I said, well, just do these 4 things, and one of them was using ormus. And he did that, and a couple weeks later he calls me up, what the hell is this? I've been trying to tell you, ormus. So, and you know, I think he sent it off to a lab and had it analyzed, and it's crazy, you know, what you see. So anyway, volcanoes create it. Microbes in soil will create it. They eat rocks, break it down into monoatomics. Fermentation will do the same thing. So if you understand this, next time you're making kraut, you could throw in some, for example, liquid sea minerals into your kraut, and you can have more ormus minerals in your kraut. You can fortify your kraut or whatever your ferment is. Now, if you really want to be geeky and go crazy with it, you can do what I do, and you can encase your fermentation vessel inside of magnetite sand, and then you can have even more ormus in your food, because encasing, when you're growing this or fermenting inside of magnetic fields, you will get radically increased amounts of these monoatomic minerals in the ferment, and they will also grow extremely fast. I don't have in this presentation a picture, but I've got pictures in some of my presentations of ferments I've done where, for example, I did water kefir, and normally water kefir babies, the little grains as they call them, they're about the size of a green pea. Well, mine are about the size of a large marble, and they grow about 3 times faster than normal. And so normally it takes 7 to 10 days to make a batch of water kefir, but with mine, feeding an ormus and doing some of the things I do, in 3-4 days I've got massive, gigantic water kefir, and everything's ready. So there's a lot of cool things, but the main thing you can do with this is you can create incredibly nutrient-dense food of all kinds and your own custom-made medicines, which I teach in other presentations. So you can actually take these and custom-make a formula, for example, for baldness or cancer or whatever. You know, whatever ails you, or all of it. You know, it's like I made a batch where it's like I just threw herbs in for everything, whatever it is, baldness, old age, you name it, ugliness. Here you go. Yeah, I've got 10 gallons. I make 10 gallons at a time, so I'll slide you sometime. But this is the cool thing. You know, it's like it's great to know all this pie in the sky physics and things, but in the end, what can you do with it? And that's one of the things you can do with it. These monoatomic minerals are also made in photosynthesis. And so, again, if you know this, you can feed your plants volcanic rock powders or sea minerals, things like that. And you can also encase them in scatter fields, which we're going to talk about. And you can get radically more nutrient-dense food that's much more healing. So photosynthesis is a really cool and very interesting interdimensional process. It's not just chemistry like we've been taught. There's actually interdimensional physics going on in photosynthesis. Another really simple way you can make it is by vortexing mineral water in a magnetic field. And that's actually not as hard to do as you might think. You can do it in a blender. I actually have kits for doing it. So that's Ormus. That's an important concept to understand about these superconducting minerals. The other concept I want to introduce you to is what some scientists now are calling scalar energy. Knowledge of this is ancient. So in the past, people have called it chi, prana, life force, orgone, tachyon energy, torsion waves or torsion fields, 0-point energy, source field. David Wilcock calls it the source field. Because what you're really talking about here, what this stuff is superluminal light that flows through the cosmos. And it's actually, I think it's God consciousness. I liken it to God consciousness. And that's what it is. It's superluminal light. It's light that travels faster than what we've been told is the speed of light. You know, when I was in engineering school, I was told that the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. Well, it turns out it's not fixed. The speed of light can vary, and there are types of light that can go way, way beyond that. And it goes so fast, it looks black to us, and so we call it dark energy or dark matter and those kinds of things. So physics is kind of starting to catch up with what the ancients knew, you know, for millennia. And they're writing about it in their journals. This is from phys.org, an article, Massive Black Holes Switched On by Galaxy Collision. And in that article it says the center, well, actually it doesn't say this, I say this. The center, well, actually they do, but not in these words. But at the centers of galaxies, there is a large black hole, a singularity. And you know, when you look at a galaxy, all of the conventional pictures of galaxies, it looks like this giant spiraling disk of stars and planets. But at the center of that, there's a big dark area. And that dark area, there is a gigantic singularity or black hole. And that energy comes, this superluminal light, this God consciousness, comes flowing out of the centers of galaxies, spiraling as it goes, and it branches as it goes. And that spiraling and branching, they call the branching fractaling in mathematics. And it's relayed outward through the cosmos. So scientists are starting to see this, and they're writing about it. Here's another article from phys.org. Telescopes give shape to furious black hole winds. Again, pointing out that this massive superluminal light, which they equate to a cosmic wind, that's really scientific, you know, is zipping out of these galaxies. So what this stuff does is it comes out of the center of the galaxies, and you know, the multiverse, the universe, has billions, if not trillions, or unlimited numbers of galaxies. You know, we're living in just one galaxy, and as big as it is to us, there are just an infinite number of galaxies in the multiverse. So each individual galaxy's got this black hole emanating this energy, this superluminal light coming out of it, this God consciousness flying out, spiraling and branching as it goes, and it's relayed through the galaxy from sun to sun to sun outward. Because at the center of all suns, it's been discovered, Nassim Haramein and others are discovering, at the centers of suns and planets, there are black holes at their centers. And these singularities at the center of these suns, you know, the very large suns at the center of the galaxy, they act as interdimensional portals or relays for this energy. So it travels from sun to sun to sun outward through the limbs of the galaxy. And also it's relayed through the singularities at the centers of planets. So when it's coming to us, it's coming down from the sun, and it's coming up from the center of the Earth, because our Earth has a singularity at the center. Nassim Haramein estimates that the singularity at the center of the Earth is about the size of a basketball, maybe a little bit bigger. But at any rate, these relays put out huge amounts of energy. They put out huge amounts of superluminal light, or scalar waves, or God consciousness, or chi, whatever you want to call it. And they're really kind of like the chakras of the galaxy, these portals. So in the case of a galaxy, you get this energy flying out, it's spiraling, it's branching as it goes, and it comes out in a donut shape. So the galaxy has a big donut-shaped field around it of this energy, and it comes up out of one side of the galaxy, spirals around, and it goes back into the other side of the donut. And as it turns out, solar systems also have that kind of a structure. You know, we've been taught that the sun is at the center of our solar system and all the planets rotate around it on a disk. Well, that's not exactly how it goes. everything is in motion in the galaxy. So our sun is spiraling around through the galaxy, and the planets around it are spiraling around it and trailing it like a corkscrew. So everything is corkscrewing and spiraling through the galaxy. And each one of these galaxies has a toroidal shape field. Solar systems have a toroidal shape field. As it turns out, suns and planets has a toroidal shape field. Toroidal just being a donut shape. So we've seen this. We've seen this with the Earth's magnetic field. You know, the Earth's magnetic field is a donut shape. That is part of the energy that's being generated by the scalar energy. And so, as it turns out, there's the picture of how the planets actually follow the sun spiraling through the galaxy. If I had more time, I'd actually show this in animated video. So anyway, this energy is flowing from the galactic through everything, from these planets, from sun to sun to sun and planets, coming down to us from the sun, coming up from the Earth. And this spiraling branching, this is what it looks like. And it can look in a lot of different variations of this, but this is known as a Mandelbrot fractal. And this is a two-dimensional picture of a Mandelbrot fractal. Fractals are simply, they are patterns, geometric patterns that are created by recurring over and over and over again. So as you zoom into this, you actually will keep seeing the same pattern recurring over and over again. This is a three-dimensional picture of a Mandelbrot spiraling fractal. So this energy that's traveling through the cosmos, it's spiraling like this, and it's branching and spinning off into all these little nodes, and that energy actually travels right through matter as if it's not even there. Because as it turns out, matter is mostly empty space. And it's actually not empty space, it's full of energy. But when you look at the, quote, particles of matter, actually the old model that we've been taught in school, what's called the Bohr model of the atom, where you've got a nucleus, and you've got an electron spinning around it, and you've got all these little particles inside the nucleus that make up that. It's not really the way it is. And unfortunately, we don't have time to get into all of that. But suffice it to say, if you take, for example, a hydrogen atom and you blow it up to the size of a football field, the nucleus will be about the size of a golf ball. And the electron spinning around it will be out at the 100-yard line. So you've got a gigantic area that's basically empty. And that, quote, empty area is actually full of this scalar energy, this superluminal light, this God consciousness flowing through everything. So it's kind of like the Force in Star Wars. There really is this energy flowing through everything. And not just 3D reality, but all frequencies or dimensions of time and space. So when that energy slows down, it actually can coagulate into matter. And this energy is the energy of consciousness, by the way. All consciousness is composed of this type of energy. And when it slows down, it forms these various patterns. These coagulates basically into fractal patterns. And you can see this manifest in nature. For example, if you look at this type of cauliflower, this looks exactly like a 3D Mandelbrot fractal. Cabbage is a fractal. You know, trees are fractals. Broccoli is a fractal. Our bodies are a fractal when you think about it. There's an amazing fractal there. So this is basically this fractaling energy that's zipping through the cosmos, slowing down and turning into matter. You ever stop and wonder, like, you know, you take a little acorn and stick it in the ground, you get this giant oak tree. Where does all that mass come from? There's not a giant hole in the ground, so it didn't convert minerals into the matter it's composed of. It's converting photonic energy, the scalar energy and other energies, into the mass. So plants are energy to matter converters. And fortunately for us, we're matter to energy converters. So we eat plants and convert them to energy. They eat energy and convert it to plant. Now, as it turns out, you can actually see the pathways for this structure, this fractal structure through the cosmos with Kirlian photography. And some people are under the mistaken impression that Kirlian photographs show the life force of an object flowing through them, and that's not actually what happens. The way a Kirlian photograph works, it actually, you electrify the subject, and then you take a picture of it with a special camera, and it shows the electricity coming off of it that you're electrifying it with. But what it does show is the pathways that that energy is following, and those pathways are the same pathways that this God consciousness, this scalar energy, follows when it's flowing in and out of living beings, or all matter. It slows down, it comes in through these pathways, slows down and becomes matter. And matter is being continually recreated over and over again by this superluminal light. So this is a Kirlian photograph. It's hard to see in this slide, but that's actually a Kirlian photograph of a coin. And over here on the right is a Kirlian photograph of a quartz crystal. Crystals, as it turns out, are high in these monatomic minerals, and they act as conduits for scalar energy. And that's why body workers, for example, can use them in healing work. The human body generates scalar waves, which we're going to get into. And you can take a crystal, put it in your hand, and direct your scalar energy through the crystal, and it will change the frequency of it, and you can use it for healing or other purposes. So you can see this Kirlian photograph. You can see these pathways of how this energy flows through these inanimate objects. But you can also see it flowing in and out of living objects as well. And so again, what you're seeing here is not necessarily the life force or the chi of the living organism. What you're seeing is the pathways where that energy flows in and out here. This is just being illuminated by Kirlian photography. So when you hear these ancient practices like Ayurveda and Qigong, Tai Chi, and Chinese medicine talk about the flow and blockage of Qi or the blockage of the nadis, what you're talking about is the interfaces in the body where this energy flows in and out of, and it comes in through these pathways. So when you're illuminating with Kirlian photography the aura of a living organism, what you're seeing is the pathways that this consciousness comes into the living organism. And we see these pathways all out in nature, all over the place. Lightning. I used to, as a kid, when I was a little kid, I used to wonder, because I used to play with electricity, much against my mother's wishes sometimes. You know, I'd plug things into the wall to see what would happen, and half the time it would blow a fuse or burn me up or something. And so I got electrocuted a few times. But I always wondered, like, why does lightning flow through the air the way it does? I mean, why wouldn't it just like go straight to the ground in a beam? You know, why does it like do all this wiggling around? It's because it's following that fractal pattern of the universe. And again, we see this manifest everywhere around us. Coastlines, you know, rivers, they all flow in fractal patterns. And the interesting thing is, you know, it's like if you zoom in on this, you see this pattern recur. It's like you zoom in closer to the coastline, you see that fractal pattern recurring over and over again at different levels of magnification. That's part of the nature of this, the mathematics behind this. They call it recursion. It's just the repetition of the pattern at every scale, from galactic down to subatomic. As it turns out, our biology is fractal. All you got to do is look at our veins, our lymph system, our nervous system. It's all branching, it's all fractal. And so in our body, we have these superconducting minerals that actually are the interface for where this God consciousness or this chi flows in and out for us. It turns out that we've got deposits of these superconducting minerals. When we eat food and we drink water high in these enormous minerals, those minerals will plug into the brain neural pathways, and it'll plug into the DNA, and it will plug into nodes along the nervous system that we happen to call the acupuncture meridians, and create superconductivity. And that superconductivity creates the extreme sensitivity to fields and energy that allows the energy of consciousness to flow in and out of our physical bodies. As it turns out, our DNA is a superconducting fractal antenna. It is one of the interfaces between consciousness and our physical bodies. Physics World has an article, actually, superconductivity. It's in the genes. This has been scientifically shown that under certain conditions, DNA and other parts of the body can be superconducting. Now, the interesting thing is, if you understand this, This kind of goes back to what can I do in my kitchen with this, right? It's like, whoop-de-doo, this is great, you know, but what can I do with it? Well, if you get this, then you can grow food or make ferments or do things, take supplements or whatever, to increase the ormus elements in your body, which raises the superconductivity, which automatically will increase healing and cellular regeneration in the body. It also strengthens the mind-body connection. It improves meditation. It improves your ability to create your reality, and on and on and on. And one little interesting side effect of this is if you feed these monoatomic minerals to genetically engineered plants or any organism, it will revert the GMO DNA back to the original heirloom. And the reason is, and I've seen this done on multiple occasions, it's not by chance or iffy or pie in the sky. You can do it consistently. But the reason this is because the genetic pattern for all living organisms is not in the DNA. We've been told by the medical establishment and the scientific establishment that the DNA is the genetic blueprint. It's actually the carrier of the blueprint. It's the antenna, the superconducting antenna that picks up the blueprint from consciousness. Consciousness is where the actual genetic blueprint is stored, and that's why it cannot be destroyed. That's why you can heal DNA. I've helped many people, including myself, heal DNA damage. I've helped 2 people with radiation damage, severe radiation damage from Chernobyl, heal themselves. Quadriplegic and paraplegic who couldn't walk, and after a year of eating healthy food, high ormus food, detoxing the body, doing certain things, they were able to walk and grasp normally again. That's the power of this stuff. This is why we need to know this. We need to know about this because we've got an insanely toxic world that keeps getting more insanely toxic. We've got nuclear fallout coming down on us now. We've got all these insane military people coming up with new ways of poisoning and killing people, geoengineering, spraying heavy metals in our atmosphere, and on and on and on. So we need this knowledge to maintain our health and happiness amidst this bombardment of madness. So I particularly love that you can feed this stuff to GMO plants, and not in multiple generations, but in that single plant you can revert it back to the heirloom, and it's really cool to see some crazy GMO like turn back, and you know, I've seen like GMO squash that went from being solid colored to striped, and the shape changed in a few weeks from feeding an ormus. So this is what we can do with this stuff, and of course you can heal DNA damage in your body too. So a little bit about our biology. Our brains, as it turns out, we're part of this giant galactic circuit of energy, this God consciousness that's flowing through everything. And it turns out that we are receptacles for this energy. We are antennas that pick up this energy and rebroadcast it outward. And our brain is the transceiver. It's what picks it up and rebroadcasts it, and it sends it out through the nervous system, which just happens to be loaded up with ormus minerals. So you've got these neural pathways in the brain, you've got these junctures in the neural pathways of these ormus elements. You also have, which creates superconductivity, which is the interface to this God consciousness, this superluminal light. The pineal gland also is a big concentrated area of these superconducting minerals, particularly gold and rhodium and platinum. So if you know that, if you're deeply into meditation and spiritual practices and you want to enhance your practice and maybe connect up to God a little quicker, you eat some high ormus food, brew yourself some high ormus brews, guzzle it down because you can make all you want for pennies. You jack up the superconductivity in the body and the DNA and the neural pathways and in the pineal gland, and all of a sudden you got a high-speed internet connection to the cosmos. And I was literally told that one time by a lady who could see auras. She could see auras, and she was so good she actually did it for law enforcement and the military and the CIA. Because she could look at like the Vietnam veterans coming off of planes, and she could tell which ones were going to be suicidal by their auras. Right? And this lady comes and does a reading for me, and she's like, "Holy God, you've got like this giant orange high-speed column of energy shooting up to the cosmos. It's like you got this high-speed connection to the cosmos." Well, it's from eating this stuff, living this way. And there's actually some water This is not in the slide presentation, but there's actually a water called liquid manna. You can go to liquidmanna.com if you're interested in getting some of this stuff. And I found about this stuff, and I started selling some of their products, and I bought a case of the water to try out. And I went to get a quantum biofeedback session with a device called a SCIO. And long story short, this machine, you get hooked up to it, and it can read all this scalar energy in the body and can tell you all kinds of stuff. It can tell you if you've got diseases. It can tell you basically your level of health. It can tell if you've got emotional issues with your mom and dad. I mean, it's crazy what this machine can see, because emotions are scalar energy, and it can measure scalar energy and frequency. And it can also alter matter. I've actually used this device to neutralize radioactivity in my body, which is one of the things that scalar energy can do. It creates matter, but it also can alter matter. And so I drank a bottle of this liquid manna before going, not thinking about it. You know, I didn't intend it. This is kind of the way my life works. I have a very Forrest Gumpian kind of life. And I mean, my wife will tell you, it's just crazy, some of the stuff that happens to me. I just fall into it. So I drank this bottle of water. And, you know, normally they say drink like, you know, maybe a quarter cup or something. I drank 16 ounces of it. And then I went and got a SCIO session. And, you know, they put this strap on your forehead and on your wrist and your ankles. And then it sends this energy in the body. It reads you, then it sends energy in. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden it's like, zap! I started like seeing all these lights flashing, these lights pulsing. And by the end of that 2-hour session, I had these red lines burned into my forehead from that thing. And of course, the practitioner had never seen that before. I'd done a lot of these things, never seen that before. I was like, oh my God. And I finally realized what it was. It was from increasing the superconductivity in the body with that water. So imagine if you do that and you're meditating. It's going to strengthen your connection to everything. It's going to strengthen your connection to yourself, to God, to the universe, to living organisms, the plants, animals, everything. You know, go out and hug a tree. Drink a bottle of that stuff, go out and hug a tree. You laugh, but I did that. And you know what? It took about a half hour to slow down enough to the point where I actually could kind of be at the same rate as the tree, because trees, they're so old, they operate really, really slowly. And I was hugging this giant oak tree. It took about a half hour to slow down enough, but when I got slowed down enough, I started seeing the stuff that had gone on around that tree. Like Native Americans walking by and all kinds of crazy stuff. It was like the most bizarre thing. I have no way of knowing if what I saw was really real, but my imagination isn't that good. So, you know. So there are a lot of really cool and interesting and practical things you can do with this. I mean, for those of you that meditate, you know, before I ever started meditating, I used to think that meditation was just about calming down and relaxing and de-stressing. And then I started meditating, I realized, like, whoa, no, this is about like getting really good, useful information that I can use in my life to do things with. You know, very practical stuff. And so if you do this kind of stuff, you're going to jack up the superconductivity in the body, especially in the pineal. If you know that gold and rhodium and platinum are good for the pineal, guess what kind of ormus I'm going to be drinking? Gold, rhodium, and platinum. And so you can do these things and get incredible results. So the brain picks this energy up, it broadcasts it down through the nervous system. The nervous system is an antenna for this energy. This is how we bring this energy in, and then we rebroadcast it out into this toroidal field, this donut-shaped field around us. It's through the nervous system. It's loaded up with these ormus minerals and also the DNA. The acupuncture meridians, as I mentioned, they are nodules of these superconducting minerals. So what happens if you eat too many McDonald's double cheeseburgers and you clog up your meridians? You know, you go to the acupuncturist, they stick a needle in there and they open it back up, right? And what happens? It gets clogged up again after a while, and you got to go back and get it stuck open again. It's because you keep eating those double cheeseburgers. So if you're not doing that, if you're living the way that we were designed to live, if you're eating live food, if you're eating healthy, drinking healthy water, and detoxing the body to keep all this junk out that plugs up our meridians, then you will have that superconductivity high all the time, and then you have a crazy magical life. So that's why the Chinese and the Ayurveda talks about qi and the blockage of the qi and opening up the qi and the flow of the qi. That's what it's all about. This is what it's about. Iridology and sclerology, these practices of looking at the eyes and different parts of the eyes, you can look at the eyes and you can tell what's going on in other parts of the body. And one of the best iridologists in the world is right here in Florida, Dr. Robert Morse down in Port Charlotte. An amazing, amazing man. He's better than any diagnostic machine I've ever bumped into. And this guy can sit down, take a picture of your eye, and look at you and tell you everything that's going on with you just from looking at your eye. It's because these parts of the eye are connected through these pathways in the body. Same sclerology, which is analyzing the whites of the eyes. Same thing. And reflexology. You know, same thing. All these parts of the body are connected through this web of superconducting nerves to other parts of the body. It's a communication system. It's a network. And it's not just a network within our bodies. You have to keep in mind that we are part of this galactic network. That's why we're all one. You know, when you hear people talk about we're all one, it's not some woo-woo New Age concept. We are literally part of a gigantic galactic matter-energy system. And you go clogging up your part of the circuit, you're going to whack the universe in your little corner. Your little corner of the universe is going to be a little bit off you know, if you're doing that kind of stuff. So, and by the way, life becomes a heck of a lot more fun, you know, when you open this stuff up. When you open up the meridians, you detox the body, you get these nutrients in, your morphology changes, you become more beautiful, you become smarter, you become more empathic, more intelligent.
I need this stuff.
I know. We all do. I know. I mean, that's why, you know, Don was talking about me staying up late. Yeah, I pulled an all-nighter, was it Thursday night. Then last night, I got an okay night's sleep last night, but I was working on this presentation, because this is a new one for me, till like 1 a.m. last night, and I feel fine. And it's because this is how I live and eat, and I don't go on sleep deprivation very much. But when I do, it's like I'm fine. So anyway, as I mentioned, you know, the body has this toroidal field, this donut-shaped field around it, and the chakras. You know, we've all been, you know, those of you who are familiar with chakras, there's supposedly these 7 points on the spine where energy comes flowing out in a spiral, right? Spiral, what's that all about? Scalar waves. Well, as it turns out, your brain is collecting this energy, this God consciousness, distributing out through the nervous system. The spine is a gigantic trunk for the nervous system, so that energy comes down from the brain, and the farther away it gets from the brain, the frequency is altered. Hence the different colors that correspond to the different chakras. It's just different frequencies of energy. Farther away you get from the brain, it hits this large juncture of these ormus minerals on the spine, and that's a chakra. The energy comes flowing out, it spirals outward. So you're this walking, breathing scalar wave antenna that's creating these, you're walking around with this donut-shaped field around you with these vortexes whipping out of your spine. And that is how we create our reality. We take this God consciousness in, we create a field, and it has a certain vibrational frequency, and it varies in many ways. And that scalar energy, because scalar energy creates and alters matter, we resonate with other things in our system and attract and physically manifest things through this system. So this is part of how we create our reality. We're actually little receptacles of God consciousness. We literally are the hands of God. We're like, you know, on this giant tentacle of a galactic circuit, and our little node here, we're sitting here sending out this energy and attracting in by our frequency, the frequency that we're operating at with our consciousness, we're attracting in something that will resonate with that frequency. So if you're operating in a frequency of fear, you're going to attract all kinds of negative stuff. And that's why the powers that be on this planet really, really want to keep the population on this planet operating in fear. That's how we're controlled. If you understand how powerful you are, that you can alter matter with your mind and your body, what can't we do? You know, what can't we do? There's a man named Dr. Thomas Bearden, who is, he was a NASA nuclear engineer, and he's one of the world's preeminent scalar physicists. And he was actually studying how cells regenerate, human cells regenerate, in order to figure out how to neutralize radioactivity. And I was reading his patent application for this technology to neutralize radioactivity. In that, he said that he discovered that all living cells actually send a scalar wave signal through the ormus elements in the body, the superconducting minerals, back in time. They send a signal back in time because this energy is not regular energy like we can see and measure in our normal electromagnetic spectrum. It's interdimensional energy, and it's not caught up in time either. It traverses all areas of time. And so these scalar waves from our cells actually go back in time to get the healthy pattern for the cell from the past and bring it into the present. That's how cells regenerate all the time. This is happening in your body 24/7 all the time. You're a time traveler. Every cell in your body is time traveling. How cool is that? I time travel all the time. I flew to California a few weeks ago. I was traveling through time. It was 3 hours earlier there when I got there. As it turns out, crystals are high in these superconducting minerals. And crystals, when you send energy through them, they're what are called oscillators. They will change the frequency of the energy, so you can use these in various interesting ways. Also, there's something called the Schumann resonance. And this is simply this energy coming down from the cosmos, striking the surface of the Earth, bouncing back up, hitting the ionosphere, and then it continually bounces back and forth between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. The cosmos is feeding this God consciousness to us 24/7, around the clock, around the globe, and it's sitting there bouncing back and forth, pulsing at a frequency that was named after a man named Schumann. 7.83 cycles per second is the main frequency, but the but is that frequency is accelerated now to almost double of what it used to be, and it's stressing everyone at a low level. Some of it's coming from man-made electropollution, some of it's coming from natural occurrences in the cosmos, and some people think that, oh, well, this is a natural part of ascension and it's a good thing. Well, that may be the case, but I can tell you unequivocally, when you put a human being or any living organism, a bacteria, a plant, person, dog, whatever, when you put them in the original Schumann resonance pulse, they heal much quicker, they're much more robust, they're healthier, they're happier, it de-stresses them at every level. So,
so the 7.83 is better than the 13?
Yes, the 7.83, in my opinion, is much better for you than the current Schumann resonance, which is up around 13 something. And I'm basing that on thousands of people who have bought devices I manufactured that put them into the old Schumann resonance. In every aspect of their lives, it improves. So there's a little image of kind of how it looks. And I'm not even going to worry about this one. Okay, this I'm going to play a little video for you. This is a cymatics experiment that I want to show you, because behind all of this energy, the interesting thing about energy that we have not really been taught is that when energy is moving and flowing, when it hits certain frequencies, it will have geometric patterns. It will form into geometric patterns. So it's kind of a bizarre notion to think that you could have sound energy or electricity or some other kind of energy, scalar waves, that when you hit a certain frequency that it will form like a geometric pattern. But that's exactly what happens. And there's something called cymatics, which is the study of frequency. And there's a famous experiment done where you take a sheet of metal, you put a sound generator underneath it, and then you sprinkle sand on the sheet of metal, and you turn the sound generator on, and you dial through frequencies of sound. And as you're dialing through sound, what you'll see is the sand will bounce around chaotically until you hit certain key frequencies. And when you hit those key frequencies, it'll lock into a geometric pattern. So let me play this. But basically it starts at a low tone and goes up to a high tone. But watch what happens. And this is also some of these patterns we see in mathematics. Parabolas, hyperbolas, these things that we're, shown in high school mathematics. So as the frequency rises, the pattern becomes more and more complex. So you go from chaos to order. Hyperbola is right there. More and more complexity. So the higher the frequency, the more complex the geometry. So you see, when you hit certain frequencies, bam, it locks into a geometric pattern. And as it turns out, the frequencies that correspond to these geometric patterns, all of them are beneficial and harmonious to living organisms. Isn't that wild? Sound creating geometric patterns. So what you're seeing is the actual geometric pattern that sound is flowing in.
Could have to do with crop.
Yeah, you know, crop circles very well may be created with some technology like that. So you see, it just gets more and more complex as the frequency rises. Okay. Yeah. So, the good old flower of life. What the flower of life is, as I mentioned, you know, this energy is flowing through the cosmos. It's coming down to us from our sun. And at the center of the earth, we have a singularity where this energy is coming outward. Well, that energy, that singularity, has a shape. It has a geometric shape. And that geometric shape is called a cubic octahedron. And when you slice that cubic octahedron in half, the cross-section of it looks like this. So, if you take certain materials and you make it into this shape, it will act as an antenna for that energy coming from the center of the earth and from the sun, and it will grasp it just like our bodies and our brains and our nervous systems do. It'll act as an antenna for it, and it will also capture the energy and create a localized field. So if you've ever seen these mandalas for meditation, or you've seen EMF protectors with this pattern on them, that's how they're working. They're capturing the scalar energy and broadcasting a localized scalar field of a harmonious frequency that will enhance meditation and protect you against electromagnetic radiation that's harmful, if it's constructed properly. Now that pattern is made, let me back up here. That pattern is actually made, all these different triangles and geometric shapes that are in here, they're just made by a whole bunch of spheres intersecting each other. So you've got all these little spheres that are intersecting each other that create these different geometric shapes. And as it turns out, when you're looking at it three-dimensionally, you get the Platonic solids. They are all created from the intersection of those circles, or those spheres. Cubes, tetrahedrons, octahedrons, dodecahedron, all these Platonic solids come from the intersection of this energy, this spherical energy intersecting, creating these shapes. This is where geometry comes from. There's geometry, the entire cosmos is based on fundamental basic geometry. And people like Nassim Haramein and others are figuring this stuff out. The Merkaba is another one of those shapes that is found inside of that singularity inside the earth. That's where it comes from, the Star of David. If you look at it two-dimensionally, it's the Star of David. There's a reason this stuff is embedded in all of our religions and our belief systems. They weren't just like, oh, I think I'll make a religion today, and we need a symbol, so let me, no, that's not how it works. This is all based on ancient esoteric wisdom and knowledge that was given to us from who knows where, you know, meditation, extraterrestrials, plants, probably all of the above. So when you hear people talking about, ooh, 432, the love frequency, or 528 or whatever, it's actually not New Age nonsense. It's cymatics. These frequencies, whether it's sound or light or scalar waves or whatever kind of energy, magnetic pulses or fields, those frequencies are harmonious and healing to living organisms, and that's why people talk about them and they call them the love frequency or the healing frequency or whatever. That's how this stuff works. Well, ancient people, you know, we were taught that, oh, the ancient people, they were poor Stone Age bastards that didn't know squat and were living in stone huts and straw houses, and poor them. They didn't have all our modern technology or air conditioning. And in fact, that's not the case. They had much more advanced technology than us. As it turns out, the more and more advanced technology becomes, the more and more Stone Age it appears. It's like the most sophisticated technology in the universe is your own biology. The most sophisticated technologies is nature. And the ancients saw this. They observed things in nature and they copied it and mimicked it. So they observed that it seemed like inside of an eggshell, the life force was stronger inside of an eggshell. Well, that makes sense because what's egg made of? It's made out of bone. And what is bone made out of? It's made out of minerals, including ormus minerals. It's got ormus in it, it's superconducting. So what you have is a superconducting vessel that's concentrating God consciousness or life force inside the egg. Well, the ancients weren't dumb. They saw that, so they said, well, let's make our own. So they built Greek amphoras or kimchi pots in that shape, and they made them out of clay that's high in what? Ormus. Yes. Those poor Greek dummies, they just, if they only had air conditioning, right? They didn't need it. They had all these things. The ancient Egyptians had technology way beyond what we've got now. So they observed this and they mimicked it, and we see this. You know, there's a reason. If you actually learn how to make traditional kimchi, or if you go to the very few traditional kimchi potters, the potters that make the kimchi pots, the actual traditional ones that still know the craft, they must use certain clay to make that pot. They must use certain dimensions. They must make the pots a certain way. It's because these are vessels for concentrating this God consciousness, this scalar energy, into the pot. And then what do? You take this thing, you throw a bunch of cabbage in it, maybe some spices, and throw it in the ground. You bury it underground. Well, why would you do that? Well, as it turns out, soil is full of crystals. Soil is full of crystals. And so all those crystals have different frequencies. And so all this scalar energy coming down from the sun and the cosmos and coming up from the center of the earth, these crystals pick it all up and they rebroadcast it throughout the soil. So you bury this thing under the soil, you're getting a concentrated dose of all these different frequencies that are harmonious to living organisms. And guess what happens? The microbes that are eating that kimchi, they get happy. They're a lot happier than sitting out in the surface, especially if they're like a steel pot or something. They get all happy and they eat a lot more and they produce more nutrients. Rudolf Steiner was getting downloads of information from a lady named Madame Blavatsky who was channeling all this stuff. And he recognized that at the start of chemical farming in the early 1900s, he realized that where this was headed was one day we were going to destroy our soils with chemical farming, and there wasn't going to be enough mulch to go around to heal it and bring it back. So he developed a homeopathic method for healing soil and regenerating soil. And when I was first introduced to this stuff, I thought it was absolute nonsense. Because I was at a farm, and there was a guy there who was also an engineer, and he said he had a 5-gallon bucket full of water, and he took a cow horn full of cow poop that had been buried underground for a year, and he dumped the cow poop into the bucket, and he took his arm and he started vortexing the water. And he would vortex it for a little while one way, and they would reverse it and do it the other way. And he'd say, yeah, we'll do this for an hour, and then we're going to spray it out on the soil, and it will improve the soil. And I'm thinking, yeah, right. Because of my training and education in engineering school, you know, this was back in the early days before I had learned better and was believing all of the bull that I was being taught in school. But as it turns out, Steiner was right. What happens here is you've got a cow horn, which is made of what? Bone. Which is high in what? Ormus. And it just so happens that horns are either, in the case of a cow horn, they're a perfect Fibonacci curve, which is sacred geometry, that acts like a scalar wave antenna with the ormus in it. It picks up the scalar waves flowing all around it and concentrates it in that horn. That's why cows and animals have horns. They're antennas that pick up scalar energy of consciousness all around them. That's why they're so sensitive. That's why deer are so fast and so flighty and so sensitive. They're antennas. They've got fractal antennas high in ormus picking up all the life force around them. They know what's around them. So you take this scalar energy concentrator and you stuff it full of cow poop, which is a mineral concentrate and a probiotic, and the microbes in it will wind up eating it, breaking it down, and what you've got is a massive, dense homeopathic that you can then put into water and dilute it. And if you vortex it, that will structure the water in ways, change the clustering of the molecules and all kinds of stuff, so that when you put it on soil, it goes down into the soil, it feeds the microbes get happy, they eat more rocks, they break down more minerals, the plants uptake more minerals, the plants are stronger and happier, the animals that eat the plants are stronger and happier, and then you wind up with happier, healthier plants, animals, people, bugs, everything. Years ago, I've got a cousin. I grew up in New Mexico, and I have a cousin who still lives in New Mexico, in northern New Mexico. And we were going to get together and go backpacking in northern New Mexico, and he said, I know how to sneak onto the Indian reservations. We can go backpacking on the Indian reservations and camp out there. He goes, you're not supposed to, it's illegal, but I know how to do it. And I was like, cool. And then he says, kind of off the cuff, he said, I don't know why, but all the animals and plants there are bigger than everywhere else. This is why. The Native Americans, Native people around the world, they understand this stuff. They may not know the physics behind it, they just know their traditions. They know how to take care of the land. They know how to take care of the animals and the plants. They know how to nurture the land, and this is what we've got to get back to. So Steiner understood this stuff, and he developed systems for doing this. And so you can buy what are called Steiner preps. And this is what biodynamic farming is based on. It's scalar energy. It's not just chemistry. It's not just this basic, simple chemistry and physics and biology you've been taught. It goes way beyond that. It's interdimensional physics. And by the way, when you take a whole bunch of these horns and you arrange them in a circle like that, what you're creating is a giant scalar wave antenna. So that's going to capture the scalar waves coming from the center of the Earth, coming down from the sun, and create a toroidal field in that area and make everything in there much, much healthier. Now, as it turns out, mountains are also scalar wave antennas. This is a picture of Mount Shasta in California, and Ileana years ago, she gave me a picture. She went to Mount Shasta, she gave me a picture of this. And she said, look at the clouds, there's UFOs over the Mount Shasta. And I thought to myself, well, there may be UFOs in those clouds, but that's not what's making that shape. Mountains are the Earth's chakras. Mountains, particularly volcanic mountains like this, they're sharp. What they are big, basically cones. They're high in these ormus elements. So they're basically a superconducting antenna that captures this energy coming from the center of the Earth, captures the energy coming down from the sun, rebroadcasts it in a toroidal field around them, and it enhances all the life around it. That's why people are attracted to mountains. That's why living organisms tend to be healthier on mountains, unless they've been nuked or something. And when that energy is spiraling up through the center of the Earth, it comes up through the mountain and it creates a vortex. And that vortex of scalar waves, if there are clouds up above the mountain, it'll slice them up into these rings. And that's when you get these lenticular clouds. That's what's going on. So if you're driving around mountains and you see those lenticular clouds or something like that, you know they're putting off scalar waves. Well, the ancient people weren't stupid. They noticed this. They said, hey, let's build our own fake mountains. And that's what they did. We call them pyramids. So a pyramid is a scalar wave antenna that captures that energy coming from the singularity at the center of the Earth and the sun, and it rebroadcasts it outward. And if you tune it, just like any antenna, if you tune it with the right dimensions and the right materials to the right frequency, it can either enhance living organisms or it can harm them. So the ancients chose to use them to improve things. Modern people are unfortunately choosing to use technologies like this to harm people. But in the case of these pyramids, that's what they are. They create a local field of scalar waves, and they create a double helix scalar wave vortex coming up out of the tip. What does that look like?
DNA.
There you go, DNA. So there's a reason why our DNA is a double helix. It is the physical manifestation of scalar waves. That's a Curlian photograph of a pyramid. Again, ancient people weren't stupid. They recognized this. They said, hey, let's build houses like this. It'll enhance the life force in them. That's exactly what they did. And if you notice, teepees are made out of electrically non-conducting materials. All of these different devices that people have made in the past generally are made out of electrical non-conductors, because non-conductors act like conductors for scalar waves. Metals and electrical conductors act as blockers or waveguides. They can be used to manipulate scalar waves. But if you're looking to create a device, a scalar wave device for beneficial purposes, it's much, much easier to use non-conducting materials like stone or bone or wood or even plastic. You can actually make a pyramid out of PVC or plexiglass or fiberglass and get incredible results. There's the Tibetan stupas. That is a scalar wave antenna. And what do they do inside of stupas? They meditate. So if you want to get a connection to God, might be a good idea to sit inside of a scalar wave transmission system. And that's what this is. The stone is no doubt made out of a high Ormus material. Same thing, and this is all around the world, in every culture, throughout millennia. They've known about this, they've created these structures. Celtic round towers. You know, archaeologists used to think that these round towers, which normally have a door way up above the surface of the ground, you know, 15 feet or more above the ground, archaeologists said, oh, well, ancient people built these to have a refuge from their enemies so they could go up into the tower and escape their enemies, and they'd pull the ladder up into the door and then be safe from their enemies. And it's like, well, what's to stop their enemies from building a ladder and climbing up in there and getting them, right? It's ridiculous. The stuff that archaeologists come up with sometimes is ridiculous, and it's all based on flawed precepts. No, what these are scalar wave antennas. They're made out of high Ormus stone. They go into the ground a certain depth. They reach up above the ground a certain depth. Their structure is designed to ground the scalar energy from the earth and from the sun into the ground, into that area, and enhance the life all around it and for miles around. And that's exactly what they do. And this is applied in many different areas. Religion. You ever wonder why churches and cathedrals are shaped the way they are? This is actually near Mecca. This is a gathering place for ceremony. Looks a lot like a radar dish, doesn't it? Obelisks are scalar wave antennas. So are domes. Put a dome with an obelisk, you got yourself a directional scalar wave antenna. And then you put a whole bunch of living, breathing scalar wave transceivers all around it. You're generating one massive scalar wave vortex. And then what do you think is going to happen if you've got this massive vortex of human energy creating this gigantic vortex, and you've got certain intentions going on with that? It's going to manifest things a lot quicker because it acts as a carrier wave. In terms of engineering and physics, that consciousness is going to create a vortex that's going to act as a carrier wave, and it's going to accelerate manifestation of whatever you're doing there, and whatever you're thinking about and intending. That's why ancient people did things like sweat lodges. You're creating a vortex, and that creates a larger scalar vortex than you can create by yourself, which will accelerate the manifestation of your intention. Good old Sermon on the Mount with an obelisk up top. Scalar vortex. Harvesting human energy. The cathedrals. That's a classic scalar wave transceiver. You got hundreds or thousands of people inside of a cathedral, all capturing this God consciousness and rebroadcasting it, and then this, made out of high Ormus stone, is capturing that and then rebroadcasting up through spires, where most likely these interdimensional beings, non-physical beings, are feeding off of it. There's the inside of a Gothic cathedral. If you understand how to build devices to capture scalar energy. This is exactly how you do it. It's creating vortexes, high Ormus stone. St. Basil's Cathedral. Washington Monument. You know, Washington, D.C. is laid out geomantically. The Founding Fathers laid it out very specifically in a very specific way for directing human energy and utilizing human energy. And by the way, so did the ancients. This is nothing new. Ancient Greece, if you look at the layout of ancient Greece, the temples with the colonnades, that is a scalar wave harvesting device. And guess where it was placed? Right next to the Colosseum. So you get a large group of people together in a circle generating scalar waves. They generate one gigantic scalar vortex, and then you got a temple there to harvest it. So if you're working with the gods, if you're working with interdimensional beings, extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, non-physical beings that operate outside of 3D reality, you do things to harvest energy for them, and they give you knowledge and information to maintain your power. Paris, laid out geomantically. The Vatican. You think that they just designed the Vatican? Like, if I was going to create Vatican City, I'd be wanting to, like, you know, make it efficient and, you know, all that kind of stuff. This is not a very efficient structure for doing what they want to do at the Vatican, unless what they want to do is different than what we're being told. You got an obelisk right there in the middle. You've got this colonnade. People gather there. It's harvesting massive amounts of human energy. These people are feeding off of us. This is how it works. Cupolas, great way to harvest human energy. I'm going to have to find out what kind of stone the Capitol building's made out of. I don't know what it is, but I would suspect it's granite or something, limestone, something high in Ormus. And by the way, the pyramids, which were mostly made out of limestone, is also high in Ormus. Burning Man. They almost got it complete. They should have continued the circle on around, but you get a big vortex like that with all these people, especially if they're in a love frequency, you can change the world. Now, our illustrious government and other governments, they understand this. Believe me, they know all about this. And they make technologies to do the same for nefarious purposes. For mind control, for weather modification, for warfare. This is a HARP antenna, which is now decommissioned. They've apparently got newer, smaller technology that's less obvious. But our government, this is one of the biggest secrets that they keep, is their use of scalar energy weapons. And so HARP and devices like it are used for broadcasting frequencies. They can bounce frequencies off of the atmosphere and direct them down into an area and do things like suppress consciousness, dumb people down, make them lethargic, make them more complacent. They can direct hurricanes or create hurricanes or other types of weather. They can create droughts. They can create floods. They can do all kinds of stuff with weather. They can actually broadcast signals onto battlefields and make people think that they're being talked to by God. That's exactly what happened in the first, I think it was the Afghan War. They used what's called voice of God technology, which is a scalar technology, to broadcast the voice of Allah into the heads of the soldiers, the Arab soldiers, and they laid their weapons down. That's exactly what happened. You can look that up. It's not like we had to go and destroy them. There were a lot of soldiers that were just laying their weapons down, the Arab soldiers, because Allah was telling them to do it. This is what a scalar wave pattern looks like from one of these antennas when it's being broadcast down from the atmosphere. You get these longitudinal wave patterns, and very often they'll intersect and you'll see a lot of weirdness going on in the sky. That's what it looks like from down below. Twice in New Smyrna Beach, I have seen this as far as the eye could see. And one time I was actually flying over Georgia, and I saw this for hundreds of miles as I was flying over Georgia. This is nefarious scalar wave activity by governments. These waves can also appear as fractals, because as I mentioned, this energy, it spirals and it also fractals. So if you look, it's hard to see these clouds up close, but these clouds all look like snowflakes, and they got all these fractal patterns in them. You can also see some chemtrailing going on. This is what it looks like when you're being chemtrailed and they're using a scalar interferometer to bombard the area. The scalar interferometry makes the stuff hang longer in the sky, and it also, the metals that they spray, they're spraying metal powders in the atmosphere, supposedly for geoengineering. Those powders act like a inductor, and they spread the frequencies more evenly on the ground below. So you're being bombarded with frequency for God knows what, suppressing consciousness, making people more complacent, reducing population, I don't know. But when you see these patterns in the clouds above you, that's what's going on. These are not natural cloud formations. That is geoengineering. Okay. So as I said, okay, that's all nice and dandy. But what can you do with this stuff? You know? And I'm going to recommend, if you want a lot more details on this stuff, you know, check out my blog and my YouTube channel. Or just Google me or search for me on YouTube, because I do a lot of teaching on specifics on applications of this kind of stuff. What you can do, you can do in your kitchen, what you can do in your yard, you know, how you can keep nuclear fallout from coming down on you. You can build a pyramid stick in your backyard, and you can keep nuclear fallout and this geoengineering crap from coming down on you. You can use microbes and this kind of technology to break poisons down on your property, on your soil and your plants, and make it non-toxic, including radioactivity. And I actually have a video on my website. If you go to the resources page of my website at freshandalive.com, there is a video of a farmer in Fukushima City who has no measurable radiation on any of his crops, when all the farmers around him cannot sell their produce because it's so radioactive. And all he's doing is spraying dirt cheap microbes on his crops. So this is the beautiful thing, is that all this stuff, we can do it. You don't need any whiz-bang high technology to do it. You can do it with simple things like a pyramid in your backyard, and you don't even have to build a big pyramid. You can make a whole bunch of little 6-inch pyramids and slap them out in your backyard and clear all that crap out of the sky. You can spray your yard with microbes and break all these toxins down. And you can use other things like this to improve your own life, and you can use it in your kitchen. So one of the applications, and this is one of the most highly recommended, because it all starts with consciousness. The reality that you live is all based on your consciousness. It's based on your frequency. You know, whether you're living in fear from time to time, or constantly, or if you're living in joy all the time, whatever it is that you're vibing at, that's what you're attracting and drawing in. So one of the practical applications for meditation is raising your vibration, staying out of fear, and attracting a magical life that you want. This, by the way, on the right here, this is the rainbow body. For those of you that are familiar with Padmasambhava, the rainbow body. When you attain enlightenment to the degree where you let go of all of the fear and you clear out all the negative frequencies in your consciousness, and you clean out the physical toxins in your body to where the mind and the body are ultra pure, then this energy flows so strongly that you get these stories of these sages and saints who could do amazing things, press their hands and feet into rock and put their impression of their hand or feet into solid rock, or teleport, or fly through the air, or levitate, etc., etc., etc. When you understand, first of all, monoatomic minerals are anti-gravitational, right? So if you get enough of that stuff in your body and you clean out all the junk in your body, you might just be able to levitate. You know? I mean, I've seen people levitate, so I know it. I know it can happen. Very high-level yogis. It takes, you know, meditating. The people I've seen that do this kind of stuff are meditating like 12 to 14 hours a day in a cave in the Himalayas. Which, by the way, how come there aren't any yogis meditating on the beach in Florida and doing this kind of stuff? It's because... I didn't hear that. It's because mountains, as I mentioned, are scalar wave antennas. And they're volcanic. They're made out of high Ormus stone. And these yogis, particularly up when you get up in the 13,000 feet level, up, you know, 10,000 feet plus in the Himalayas, they're sitting on a gigantic, massive scalar wave antenna that's basically like a connection to God. They're meditating inside caves, which is like being inside of a pyramid. They're eating high Ormus food that's grown on high Ormus soil. They're drinking high Ormus spring water. How does spring water get up to the top of a 13,000 foot high mountain? Where's the pump for that? It's not. It's levitating. The ormus minerals in water, this is how spring water comes up to the surface. It's not pushed up usually by hydrostatic pressure. It's levitated up by these ormus minerals. That's why people in the know recommend and drink spring water. You know, assuming it hasn't been polluted, it's high in these monoatomic minerals. That's how these guys do this stuff. So, water vortexing. Again, you know, if you look at what happens in rivers and creeks, you've got stones that are crystals that are emanating all types of different scalar frequencies. A lot of them are magnetic. So you've got water vortexing over scalar fields and magnetic fields, and the water gets mineralized by brushing over those rocks, and then that vortexing action in the presence of scalar fields and magnetic fields creates ormus. So you can do that too in your kitchen. You can buy a device called a water vitalizer if you're not the do-it-yourself type. Unfortunately, these things now are about $600. They keep raising the price on them, but that device, it just vortexes water in a strong magnetic field, and you put spring water into it, or you put some mineralized water into it, or let's say you don't have mineralized water. Let's say you put some distilled water in it, throw in some sea minerals, just throw in a dab of liquid sea minerals, maybe a teaspoon in one of those, vortex it for 20 minutes. You got massive ormus water. So I do that. I do that. That's all I drink. And well, that and another. I've got another system called a miracle water system that does that as well. But you can do it too. You don't have to buy one of these for $600. You can go get for 20 bucks. You can get some magnets and slap them onto your blender and do the same thing. And if you want to know how to do that, just go online and Google magnetic blender, and you can see instructions on how to do that. I'll be coming out with a kit at some point that you can just Velcro some little blocks onto your blender and do it. And let me tell you, I've done this before I ever had bought a vitalizer. I did this with magnets, and I just took some water and threw some sea minerals into it, vortexed it for about 10 minutes, and I fed it to plants and I fed it to water kefir, and they went insane. They grew like crazy. The water kefir just exploded. I mean, the grains multiplied to like 5 times their normal size. The ferment was done in 1/3 of its normal time, and of course the nutrient levels were off the charts. Plants, same thing. You do this and you feed it to plants, you'll get insane growth and insane nutrient levels in plants. And you can drink it. You can also use these concepts in fermentation. You can take a microbe mixture called effective microorganisms, also known as EM1, and you can mix it with some molasses in 5 gallons of water, and you can make a probiotic in about 3 weeks. So you can have 5 gallons of probiotic that you can then guzzle all day long as much as you want, because it only costs about 30, 40 bucks to make. And if you want to go beyond that, you can make your own medicines. If you get volcanic rock powders like azomite or rhyolite, also known as Jersey green sand, or Redmond minerals, any volcanic minerals, and you throw them into your ferment, it's going to create ormus. The microbes eat the minerals, they break them down into angstrom and monoatomic particles, you drink it, you get happy. And you can increase it even more if you put your fermentation vessel inside of a magnetic field. So the easy way to do that is to take a large fat fermentation bucket and a skinny, taller fermentation bucket, and stick the skinny bucket inside the fat bucket and fill the gap in between them with magnetite sand, which you can get off of eBay, and you got yourself a magnetic field. And then you do your ferment in there, and you're going to have massive amounts of ormus in your brew. And if, let's say, you want to heal a particular disease or issue or whatever, go to herb companies' websites, look at what herbs they put into different formulas for whatever ailment that you got, get those herbs and throw them into your brew and ferment them down. And it will enhance them with ormus, it will make them even more powerful, and you can target, you can make your own medicine specifically for you. I will have a DVD coming out on specifics on how to do this and some of my recipes and things. It's cheap. It's ridiculously cheap. You can use this stuff also for agriculture or for gardening or for your yard. Once you got your 5 gallons, you can take about 2 tablespoons per gallon and you can spray it on your yard, and it will break toxins down including radioactive toxins, make them non-toxic, and it will feed the microbes in the soil. They'll get all happy and they'll produce more nutrients. So if you're gardening or growing stuff, or you just got a lawn, your lawn will look better. Cheap. Or you could go hire the guy at ChemLawn.
Yeah, right.
I do this with sprouting. You know, I have in a porch room, I have a shelf where we grow sprouts, and this is how we eat. My wife and I eat this way all the time, and we forget until we go traveling or go visit family how the rest of the world lives. And I was like, how do people live like this? Eating food that has nothing in it. It's like when you get used to eating high-ormus food, it tastes incredible, first of all, and you get gigantic fruits and vegetables that are really nutrient-dense. And sprouts, we foliar feed our sprouts. We grow them indoors and outdoors, and when we grow them indoors in trays, we'll take some ormus products. There's one called Migro Minerals. There's one called Humana Gold. And then right here in DeLand, you've got Quality Green Specialists at the end of 92 who sell an incredible natural fertilizer mixture called 305, and that will create ormus in soil. And you get insane nutrient-dense growth. So you can grow your own foods. Even if you're in a high-rise in the middle of Manhattan, you can be sprouting in your house and growing high-ormus, nutrient-dense food and be laughing your way not to the doctor. So, you can also build pyramids. I was honored to be asked by Dr. Patrick Flanagan to write the foreword for his book, Pyramid Power. Some of you might remember the book, Pyramid Power, from the 1970s.
Yes.
He is a real pioneer in this area, and most of the people these days who are doing work in this area owe him a debt of gratitude, because his pioneering work is really what most people's work is based on now. But he figured out, he basically studied all of this stuff throughout history and then made a lot of brilliant insights about it, wrote the book Pyramid Power. It's not just about pyramids. And so that spun off into a lot of other people's work. And so Dr. Alexander Golod, who is high up in the Russian military, when the Cold War cooled down a little bit, he had a multi-million-dollar a year budget, and he also had heavy-duty credentials, scientific credentials, and military credentials, and he had access to a lot of top-secret technology. He started studying pyramids. Presumably, the Russian military probably wanted him to study them for weaponry, but he wound up studying them for beneficial purposes. God bless his soul. And he found out a lot of amazing stuff. And because he had the resources that he had and the knowledge that he had, he proved a lot of stuff, what was going on with these pyramids. So he built a lot of different pyramids, and one of the things he figured out, by the way, was that all these ancient pyramids around Earth are actually part of one planetary grid system. They're part of a planetary scalar energy grid system. So whoever, even though they were built at different times, whoever oversaw the development of these pyramids had to have had at least aircraft travel capabilities, if not space travel capabilities. So anyway, he figured that stuff out. He figured a lot of stuff out about pyramids. He built this one outside of Moscow, 144 foot high, completely made out of fiberglass, wood, and glue, no metal whatsoever. This is the inside of it. These are large quartz spheres that they put inside of here. One of the things Golod figured out was that these pyramids, when you put quartz crystals inside of them, or any kind of crystal, it will program them with healing frequencies, which you can then take them out and give them to somebody, and they will emanate healing scalar frequencies that can help people. And so, so these people are actually sitting there getting healed. This is the inside of his pyramid. But the interesting thing was that some of the things that he found out about this, studying them scientifically, he discovered they would detoxify groundwater and reduce hardness and nuclear radioactivity in groundwater and in the atmosphere for like 350-kilometer diameter. Huge area. It would neutralize radioactivity in the atmosphere. It would improve the weather, radically decreasing severe weather of any kind, whether it's wind or storms, lightning. Because when you clean the atmosphere, what these things do, he showed, they create this vortex up out of the tip of that that pyramid that actually acts like an upside-down tornado of scalar waves that sucks the pollution out of the atmosphere and sends it out into space or neutralizes it entirely. So he showed that. It'll neutralize poisons placed inside of it. It improves the immune systems and cellular metabolism of all living organisms, whether it's bacteria or plants or animals. It increases yields of seeds and crops. Here's an interesting one. It reduces seismic activity. And the reason it does that is because the scalar energy that it's putting out allows these tectonic shifts to be released frequently in little doses rather than one big release all at once. So it reduces earthquakes. You think they might be able to use that in California? Imagine what would be going on if people were building pyramids all over California. Removes pollutants, as I mentioned, out of the atmosphere. Heals the ozone layer, lowers the viscosity of oil wells, increasing yields. Now here's an interesting one. It brings back a lot of springs to the surface. They discovered all these springs popping up for miles around this pyramid. Well, it's because if you understand Ormus, and Ormus being anti-gravitational, and you put a big scalar field, it's going to strengthen the levitation of the Ormus, and it's going to push the Ormus water down in those aquifers up more strongly, and you're going to get springs popping up. But the one that really gave me hope for humanity was this one. They discovered these flowers growing in the fields around that pyramid. If you go back there, the fields around that pyramid, they discovered these flowers growing. And no one had ever seen the flowers before, so Golod called in a botanist and had them identified. And it turns out those flowers have been extinct on Earth for 11 million years. So you talk about the Akashic records, Golod theorized that these pyramids with the scalar energy was able to tap into the quantum field or the Akashic records and bring the pattern for this back into existence, into our 3D reality. And so if that's the case, you know, we might be able to bring back some extinct species. We don't want to bring all of them back, particularly a lot of ex-presidents. But, so there's a lot of different things you can do with pyramids, and there's a lot of really amazing scientists who are proving what these things can do now. So you got Alexander Golod, you can study his work, Dr. Samir Osmaganich, who I've been in contact with, brilliant man. He discovered the largest pyramids in the world in Bosnia. They were so big they thought they were mountains. I mean, you can see that in the background. They just thought, oh, that's a big square mountain. They were covered with trees and grass and dirt. Everybody thought they were mountains. He's digging them up and finding out, no, somebody made these things. And they made them out of stone that's high in Ormus. Exactly. And he emailed me. He was showing me all these videos that they were filming of the stuff they were discovering. And one of them was like the pyramid complexes in Egypt. There's actually a whole complex of pyramids here. It's not just one. And there's a river flowing through it all. And they discovered that there's all of these what appear to be parallel concrete slabs angled at 45-degree angles in the river, all the way through the river for miles and miles. And it channels the water into a deeper, colder channel in the center, and then water flows over the surface. And they discovered it structures the water homeopathically in a very beneficial way. So it makes it more healing to living organisms, right? So I assume they used it on their crops and animals, and they drank that water themselves. Well, of course, conventional archaeologists were poo-pooing his discovery, saying, oh, there's no way, those are not natural rock formations, but the stuff is stone. When they analyze it at the molecular level, it looks like stone. Well, it turns out that these were cast like concrete, and all these pyramids were cast like concrete. But the scalar waves that they emanate over time alter their atomic structure and make them look like stone at the atomic and molecular levels. So that's why nobody could figure out how they were made. They were just cast like concrete. Also, Dr. Valery Uvarov, another Russian pyramid scientist, is discovering a lot of really cool stuff about pyramids. And German scientist, Dr. Konstantin Meil, for anybody who's got a science or engineering background that wants to get into the details of the mathematics and science, this guy's done it all. He's done the math, he's done the science, he's done the experiments, proving what's going on. He even figured out what Einstein and his contemporaries couldn't figure out, which is one equation that describes all matter and energy at every level and scale, from the galactic to the subatomic. It's called the unified field equation. Einstein spent his whole career working on that, couldn't figure it out. Meil figured it out. But because it doesn't jibe with the orthodoxy, he's not getting a Nobel Prize. Quite the opposite. And he's making devices. If you want to play with this stuff, you can buy a scalar wave generator from him and you can play around and do all kinds of things with it. Dr. Thomas Bearden, an American nuclear engineer retired from NASA. Lots and lots of information on YouTube and books from this man as well. I manufacture devices that do this as well. Power devices, unpowered devices. I teach people how to make their own. You can make your own. If you watch other videos I've done on YouTube, I'll also be coming out with DVDs and videos with the details on how to do this. But you can make your own devices to capture this energy and use it for improving sleep, protecting against electromagnetic radiation, improving plant growth. I've got some people who are very cutting edge in Colorado that are using an Egyptian technology based on Egyptian hieroglyphs, the sacred geometry in Egyptian hieroglyphs, combined with pyramid-shaped greenhouses and my technology to grow hemp. Medicinal hemp. Medicinal hemp. Which, by the way, is amazing. I've been using medicinal hemp with it has no THC. It's legal in all 50 states. I've been using it for the last 4 months. Absolutely amazing. It's an amazing heal-all. So you can build these little pyramids. You don't have to have giant pyramids. The way I discovered this, we manufacture these little pyramids, and my manufacturing people put 5 of them out, or actually it was 3 of them out on the picnic table in my backyard. And I was out mowing grass, and I saw this big fat chemtrail that was like falling apart, spiraling and flying apart and dissolving. I was like, what the heck is going on with that? And then I got back to the house, and I saw my guys had put these out on the back patio, and I thought, there's no way that could be doing that. And so, but there was like this big hole in the chemtrailing right around our house for about 5 mile diameter. So I drove around town and looked, and sure enough, it's like, yeah, there's this giant clear hole of clear sky, and there's chemtrails everywhere else. So I went back and I put 5 of them out. And I waited a couple hours, I came back out, and as far as the eye could see, the skies were clear. So I drove around, I got about 35 miles away before I saw the edge of it then. Came back home, I put 7 of them out, I figured, well, that'll keep me covered. And then a few weeks later, my wife and I went over to Disney, which is about 75 miles away. And at Disney, we could see off in the distance the event horizon of this stuff with 7 little pyramids. So you can do this too. Whoop. If you're too lazy or don't want to do it, you can buy this stuff off of eBay. There are people making what's called orgonite. And most of the orgonite I've seen is not very good, but there are some people that are doing some really cool stuff with it. This is one of them. This is actually for sale, or was for sale on eBay. And they're using metals, which I normally don't recommend, but they understand the physics of it, so they're doing it right. And it would be very interesting to see what this pyramid could do. And there are also people making devices called cloudbusters using these principles. So, thank you very much.